Welcome to our last session. So both happy and sad to be here. Today we're going to be talking about leading a change that you may dislike. And so we'll be pulling on everything that we've done over the last 4 sessions, as well as introduce a few new things for you to think about as we go through our process of understanding how we're going to take something like that on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up the PowerPoint, and we'll get going. All right, great. So start off with some reminders. We've been using this Zoom setup. I won't go through all of these again, but I'll just share as a reminder.
Yeah, I'm just going to use the restroom and then good to go.
You guys, let's start with the mute. So if you guys could, everyone please tweet where they are, and I can, if we need to, I can mute everybody and then remember to unmute myself because I screwed that up last time. And then we'll be using the chat as we go through here, and we've got a couple of polls as well. But if you have other things you want to use the reactions or any of those, feel free to do that. Here's just a reminder of where all of that is. So here we are at the end of our session, series of 5 that we've been doing. So the flow has been working to just start with understanding where we are in the whole story of what's going on with the change. So we started with the change story from there, and then stepped into finding out who your influencers are, who are those major people, and then from there to being able to measure what's happening, gathering feedback, and then being able to act on it. And all of that together should be able to lead us to what is our plan going to be about how we're going to take on this change and then actively manage the change as we're going through it. And we're going to try out some of that, especially when we get to Leadership Skyward and we work with our case simulation for a little bit. All right, so what I'd like to do as we go through, just as you heard some of that, I would love to get some feedback from you guys in the chat as to what you're hoping to get out of this session. Let's just start with that.
Back in, I think it's a University of Richmond.
Mute.
All right, nobody wants to put anything in. You guys are freaking me out.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you, Amber.
There's a delay, I think.
Oh, wow.
Like have lost interest in or begun to dislike. That's a good one. Kind of lose your steam on it. Yep. How to unsee the flaws and carry the message well. Oh, that's really good. Align attitude and action to get the change accomplished. Feel more confident about how to position and supporting a change. Not publicly confident or supportive of before, especially as my leader for my team. How to lead a change that you know is ineffective or wrong or otherwise a bad idea. Wow, yeah. Whew. That's a good one. Ditto to Chris. That's funny, Julie. Yeah.
Yes, Chris.
Yes, Chris. Yeah, this is good.
So one of the things that we'll talk about, some will go in here, we're going to differentiate a little bit between making a group decision and then executing the change. So as you may have intuited from our company name, the change decision, we think about both of those. And so some of what you're talking about when you're talking about the change being wrong, ineffective, and the way that we would view that, we would think about that as the decision-making process. And so we'll talk a little bit about influencing there, because to some extent, once the decision's made, at least in many organizations, you're stuck with it, and unwinding that is difficult. So we want to talk a little bit about how do you influence upstream to be able to do that well and have some effect there, so that you're not trying to execute a change that you're feeling is just the wrong thing to go do. All right, great. So thank you for those. All right, so let's jump in.
So this session, we're talking about a change you dislike. And so what we're going to talk a lot about is you and your relationship with the change and the people that you're leading through it. So that's mainly what you'll see in the content here and the content of our discussion together. So this, we cover these three topics every single time. Change we see, leading change intentionally is simply a gesture of respect. Again, as I always say, when you think about everyone needing to be respected in the process, it makes it easier for you to understand what kinds of things you need to do. When you're leading a change you dislike, it's especially important to think about how do you make sure you're respected in the process? How do you make sure the organization is, the customer, and the people who are impacted? And just to pause here for a second, we in our corporate life, we led teams that were, let go in the end. And so those were not change decisions that we were in the position of making, but we were in the position of carrying out. And so this concept really mattered to us. And so we would almost over rotate on it and look to come together with other people in leadership positions to figure out how do we support people in this moment? What extra things do we need? And we would do things like set up a room where everyone could come together and talk about it. Set up a room where everybody could share information with each other about what they're doing and what opportunities they see. That was our way of leading a change that we really hated, but taking ownership for ourselves in our role in it, and doing what we could to support people through the process. And so we'll talk about some of the things we did and some of the philosophies behind those actions as we progress through this. So if you go to the next one we talk about, the second concept is a leader must change first before a change can happen. That is so important. As I've said before, when change is introduced, people will start to look at you as a leader because they're trying to understand what's happening and trying to make sense of it and trying to understand what it means to be successful in this new world. And so you are the model for that, and they're just on high alert for seeing how you are behaving and reacting to the moment. So making sure that you're understanding your influence in that moment is really important. So this concept certainly applies when you're leading a change that you don't care for.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been hearing in this Joy research that we've mentioned a few times is this phrase, I'm a change agent. And I'd be interested actually to start off with, if you guys could tell me, just put it in the chat if you would, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase, I'm a change agent? What do you think, what does that mean, or what are you hearing from the person when they tell you that?
My gut reaction would be they're already not aligned with my thoughts or thinking, and then it's already an uphill battle to have a conversation with them. If that
Why
makes
is
sense.
that, Dan? Why do you think about it as an uphill battle?
Just change and agent, and I guess the terminology in general, maybe just the connotation in my brain in my various worlds and roles that I've been in. But it feels like someone's here to disrupt and alter things. That's my gut reaction initially.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you what this was a bit of a surprise. So what we discovered in going through these interviews that we've been doing with CEOs is that someone will say, well, Ed and Roxanne, I'm a change agent. And then the next thing that they'll talk about after that is not how they guide change into their organization. They'll talk about how they drive a hammer through their organization. And it's not about, I'm trying to get us to a place altogether. It's about, I'm driving my agenda. And if I'm the boss, it's going to be my way, and that's how it's going to go. I don't know that that's true everywhere, but it's been striking to have that come up again and again, that is what that's what the next 5 or 6 sentences are going to be about. It's
Yeah.
not going to be about I trying and talk about any of the things that we've been talking about, crafting a plan, putting it together, and bringing people along and trying to actually make an improvement to the culture as a result of that. It's much more of a, we're going to jam it in and potentially suffer through it. It might be a rough 3 or 4 months, but we'll get through it. So that's kind of a fascinating opposite of the approach that we're advocating with you guys and trying to describe as we come through here.
Yeah, and you can see Nathan has said this too. They think they can have an impact.
Yeah,
And then Amber says, depends on the nonverbal. Yeah.
yeah,
Whether they're either there to help or force change no matter what.
yeah. That's a great point, Amber. One of the nonverbals was, well, Ed, I'm a change agent, and like it was actually a punch in the air. I'm like, okay, great. So that is definitely a different point of view than what we want to go about advocating here. All right, thanks for that.
And then the last of the 3 concepts that we always talk about is everyone's point of view is valid, even if I don't agree or understand it. And we say this a lot because we feel like this is an important mindset to have when you are thinking about leading change. In other words, by having this kind of mindset, especially when you disagree with someone's point of view, the idea is to make you curious first instead of judgmental first. Judgmental is where we can kind of go automatically. We can get curious when we're reminded, but oftentimes we have to be reminded first. So this statement is a challenge, always a challenge to you to think about this as you are embarking on leading a change or in the middle of leading a change. So let's go to the next. Okay, so what do you do if you don't like the change you are leading? So as I said, we're going to talk a lot about your relationship to the change, and we're going to talk a lot about self-management, and we're also going to talk about what it means to the people that you're leading.
Yeah, I think this is where the decision-making thing pops in too. So what we would advocate is for you to connect on the decision itself. And I think one of the perspectives that you can bring, hopefully even easier now, having spent some time with this workshop, is what is the impact going to be of a potential decision alternative, right? So now you can start talking about not only what are the obvious sort of bottom line impacts or maybe risk mitigation, but what's going to happen to the people and what that may have on the ultimate final outcome for whatever it is that you're putting in place. The classic one that we hear again and again is often within IT departments and talking about putting a system in place, and we don't need to worry about putting in any of this change management stuff because they have to use the system.
Right.
They don't have a choice to use the system. The reality is that we see again and again is that people always have a choice. One of their choices may be that they're going to call your help desk until your help desk collapses because of so many calls, because they don't know what's going on with the new system. And so there are always choices that are in there, and making sure that whatever alternative comes up encompasses all of those is going to be dramatically important. And then even if it is something you don't like a layoff, right? No one's going to be happy that we have to go do layoffs, but leading through that well and managing the change well is first off respectful for the people that you're going to lay off, and immensely important for the people that are going to remain so that they can have confidence in the company and confidence in how they're going to be treated if it continues to go bad, and unfortunately they too have to be laid off.
Right.
So anyway, some thoughts for you guys to think about with regard to those.
All right, so we're adding 2 new elements to some of the things that we've talked about in the past. So the change story is certainly important in this situation when you're leading a change you don't like. But what we're going to talk about is examining the way you feel about the change, and then imagining the outcome you'd like for the people, ideally, that you are leading through this change. So we're going to talk about those 2 things and how to do those things practically. And by the way, if you have looked at our private site, you'll notice that we put 2 exercises out there already that support items 1 and 3. So they're just there for you to use for future use. Anyway, just want to make sure you pointed them out. So we want to introduce a couple of concepts. So the first one is, if you think change will be hard, it will be. The story here that I wanted to share was one that I experienced where I was really surprised. We had experienced a situation where the organization we were working for decided that they were going to, reorganize basically. And so they told us in June that they were going to reorganize, and then basically didn't talk to us for 3 months. It was kind of a lost summer. The thing that was challenging about that was it put everyone kind of in this really weird freeze. They didn't really understand what was important to continue to focus on. All the projects sort of languished because they couldn't tell if it was relevant anymore to this new way of working, but it was just very vague. So there was no traction happening. And people were starting to make up things to do, or they were, just really retracting. So it kind of brought this part of the company to a screeching halt. And then the problem that was going on there was the leadership knew that they were going to have to make some announcements about letting people go or reorganizing that people weren't going to like. But the problem beyond that was they had already decided that the change is going to be hard. The difficulty in that is that once you decide it's going to be hard, then it's going to be. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas if you could take some steps to make people productive during this difficult time, during this kind of confusing time, that is a positive thing to do. There are lots of things that you can do to make even a difficult decision or a difficult outcome or difficult goal a positive experience for people. No kidding, positive, because really people just want something constructive to do. They want to feel like they're making a positive contribution even while they're in this interim state. So oftentimes, so in this particular instance, leadership thought it was going to be difficult, and then they kind of made it difficult by not thinking about how, imagining something different for the people involved. So if we go to the next one, the second concept I wanted to share with you is this. Most people won't have a choice in what the decision is about the change, but they always have a choice in how well they adapt and how they experience the change. So what that means for you as change leaders is that you help them see that choice, and you set up the environment, you provide that emphasis, you hold space for them, whatever words you want to use, but you basically help them see that they have that choice, and you make the environment such that choice is given. You do have that power as a leader, even if you are in middle management, even if you just have, you're in this lower level space and you have a team reporting to you, even if it's peers of yours, you always have that power to help people see that they have a choice, even by the way you're doing it, if you are affected. So this is a way to think about it that is more empowering for you and results in being more empowering for the people that you're leading.
Yeah, and this is the dynamic where, the change agent CEO gets tripped up in whatever the CEO is trying to accomplish, because not taking this into account actually makes that change harder.
Yeah.
So they leaning into, well, I will push even harder, just continues to get a pushback from the group. What we're advocating is a planned approach that considers how people are going to take all of this on in order to get the result that you wanted in the first place. So it's not about pushing harder, it's about being more thoughtful about how it's going to impact the people that you're trying to lead through this change.
Yeah, and the main thing is to communicate this intention directly and indirectly. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where we have 2 questions for you. So how do you feel about the change in general, and why is that? So do we want to do all of this one, or?
I'm gonna, and what will be useful, we're gonna go through a couple of things and then ask you to talk about it. So if you could think about a change that you're either experiencing right now or a change that you have coming up. So just give you a moment, contemplate that change. What is it? Think for a moment about how you feel about that change and why. Let's give you a moment to do it. We won't have awkward, gigantic silence. But I'm going to give you 10 seconds to kind of contemplate that. And we're going to take you through a couple of the questions. I'm going to ask you guys to either put it in the chat or talk to us a little bit about that so that we're thinking about it. So I'll shut up for a second. Think about this change and why you feel the way you do. All right, good. So now I want you to flip it and start to think about your team. If you're thinking about the team, either that you're leading, or you could even expand it to the company if you're not personally driving this particular change. How do you want your team to feel about the change process? Not about the thing itself, but the process that will be undertaken with the change. And then what would help them feel that way? Contemplate that for a moment, and then I'm going to ask for your feedback. All right, good. So hopefully that's all in your head.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before, that people are not usually upset by what is changing. They get upset about how a change is handled, right? So most people, you know, they may not like the change that you're introducing, but they can typically understand why it's being done. Or that this is the decision the company, this is the direction the company is deciding to take. They can usually, you know, they understand why something is happening or why a change is happening. But where they get upset is how the change is handled. So this goes back to the first concept of treating people with respect in the process. So if they feel like they're being treated with respect, then they are less upset about the change happening. And that's true about the people around them too. So if they see others treated with respect as well, again, that makes them feel better that this is okay. So I don't like this, but at least I'm being respected in the process, and so is everyone else. That is, in our experience, the key to making change, especially difficult change, happen. Even the changes that are most difficult, like the changes in the changes where people are let go, because people have felt respected in the process, they have actually been okay. They have felt okay about it. They have even thanked us for how it went. And so, you know, we're not advocating for getting the thank you. That's not the point here. But what I'm saying is, even in the worst possible scenario, at least in the perfect world that we've experienced, you can still do this in a very intentional way and have people feel okay with it in the end.
So what I'd like you to do now is thinking about this change and kind of contemplating, going through. I'd love to hear from you guys about, either put it in the chat or if you just want to come off mute and tell us how that how is going. And this is an important differentiation between what is going on, what the change is, versus how the change is actually being implemented. So if you got any good ones, I'd love to hear a good one, because sometimes we focus on the negative ones. So if someone's got a change that's going particularly well and being managed well, that would be great. But if not, happy to talk about one of the other ones. So,
Hey, Ed, this is Megan.
Yeah.
Can
Hey,
share.
Megan.
Sorry, I'm sitting in my deck and workout gear, so I'm not turning my camera on the whole time, and you'll be listening to
All right,
birds. So anyway,
deck and everything's really great. Got it. All right. What do you got, Megan?
So I'm leading a change right now at work, and I actually was hired to just recreate a whole channel for our sales team. So our sales team has 2 channels that they can filter drugs through with their docs. They have a hub pharmacy, which is amazing. It's like a concierge type service, but from a compliance standpoint, the government looks at that hub as a place where pharma companies can control fills. So it's a risk for us. So my retail channel is supposed to reduce that risk for us, but there's a ton of stuff that we can't control. So we rolled this channel out last year as a company before I was here, and it didn't go well. So the sales team does not trust Walgreens, particularly as an option, because Walgreens is like the Titanic. It doesn't move fast. It definitely cannot avoid the iceberg, but they have to use it. So they have patients that have a retail need for their scripts. And I'm leading this change right now, telling the team that they need to trust something that they can't touch all the time. Through people that they can't impact, and that they need to trust that if a script goes there, that their doctors aren't going to be upset and patients' needs are going to be met. So I'm doing a ton of work with Walgreens, and I think a lot of this is just, not, again, I love that quote. It's not that the change is happening, but how it's being handled. What I've found that is so helpful is getting in front of the sales team every single week and answering their questions, because they really just need to feel like all of the questions that they wonder about are things that I've thought about, that I'm addressing. And I don't think that they always have to hear a perfect answer. It's just that they know that I'm thinking in the same way that they are, and that I'm getting ahead of those things. So I feel like the change is going well, because it's not perfect. Walgreens is never going to be perfect, but they do feel confident that if something goes wrong, I'll be there to fix it, as will my team. So I found that communication is something that's really helped, where, we've put a big process around this change. And yes, there's a ton of stuff that's going into it, but it's really the communication that I found that's the best piece of the change. Not necessarily all the process that we've done around it. So that's just a big takeaway for me this week that's made that sales team feel better.
That is so awesome, Megan. We say this all the time as the emotion gets higher, right? The reality of it is right there in your face. Staying consistent with those communication channels, like even just saying, hey, I don't have anything new, but still showing up as you promised to show up, builds that trust, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to be real.
Yeah, and one thing that's helped to build that trust is I've shared anecdotal stuff. So I've been super transparent about what we found that's wrong in the process and what we're doing to fix it. So that way I'm kind of getting ahead of any of those questions or people that are upset, but I'm also sharing one or two really good things that have happened. So that way the team knows that, this isn't perfect, we'll work through it, but there are really cool wins that they didn't even know were going to happen. So I think that that's been a really positive thing.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of amazing about that idea is, so to sit here in this group of 20 plus people that are associated with an MBA program and say, hey, what's really important? We should communicate to people about what we're doing, can seem like blindingly obvious. But I'm sure that if we were to take a poll of everybody right now, have you ever been in a situation where, you don't have to admit it yourself, but somebody else wasn't actually communicating as much as they probably should have? And as a result of that, you were confused or afraid or uncertain about what was going on. I bet we would get close to 100% yeses, because it happens all the time. And I think this is one of those things where it is very useful, if you're the leader, to have somebody that is helping you with the change components of it. Even if you're in, don't have one, enlist somebody to help you and say, hey, I need you to really pay attention to how I'm handling the communication connection point with all of this. Or if you get to do that, that you are whispering in the leader's ear going, hey, we need to communicate on a regular basis, because it gets skipped all the time. And as a result of that, inadvertent bad things happen and people are surprised. And I don't understand, why is everybody upset? Well, that's why they're upset. And I think just reminding ourselves of that and starting off with that kind of clear communication is incredibly important as a result of that.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Thank you.
Cool.
All right. Let me bring us back.
It disappeared for some reason.
I'm reconnecting. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about a tool that we've used to be able to help us do kind of an emotion check-in. So you want to cover this and we'll do a little poll?
Yeah, so you may have seen something like this before. some people call it change curve, lots of people, there are lots of change curves out there. We find this kind of thing is really useful when you're a leader, especially if you have a leadership team that you're working with to lead a change together. From time to time, it's good for you to just check in and see where you are on the spectrum, and then think about where your team is. And then also it's useful for when you want to take a look back and see, okay, where was I 2 months ago and where am I now? And why is that? Where's my team 2 months ago? Why is that? Another way we've used this is to bring a team together and have them physically construct this spectrum, all of these emotion, like cards of these emotions, and just like line up against the wall and, say where they are, and then rearrange themselves for where they were, however many months ago. It's a great way to tune in to what's going on and start the conversation about why that is, and is there something that could be done to make it better for people.
Yeah, so we were actually doing this in the traditional sense. We were at the Robbins School in one of the rooms. We would have made you get up and actually stand across the wall on this spectrum just so you could see what happened.
Yeah.
But since we're virtual, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do it via this poll. So I'm going to launch the poll. And what I'd like you to do is thinking about the change that you had in your head. Answer this question. How are you feeling about the change and you're experiencing, or this change that you're soon to experience? And just pick where you are. Okay, the returns are coming in. Some people are contemplating. All right, let's give you another 10 seconds. All right, so I'm going to show you the poll. I want you just for a moment think about, where do you think everyone would be? What do you think the spread actually would be? Give you 2 seconds on that, and I will show you the results. All right, so we have this like tight, somewhat normal distribution here with no one picking the outer edges, which never ever happens. So I don't know what that says about you guys, but it says something. I just don't know what it is. But we're generally kind of in the middle, in this kind of open, but maybe a little frustrated, maybe impatient kind of place. It's interesting to see where it is. And especially we would suggest using something like this because we are often surprised by where the group is, and sometimes just surprised by what the distribution is. Because you may end up with people clumped in 2 or even 3 different places. Sort of amazing that we're not getting the same kind of consistent results altogether. Anyway, that could be very useful to understand what's happening with folks.
Yeah, so it's great as a conversation starter.
All right, so what are you going to do with that is kind of the next thing. So let's step into that. Let me get rid of my poll thing.
Okay, so I think you can bring all 4 up. So these are the things that, this is about self-management. So one of the things that we want you to do, and this is related to the exercises that are up on our private site, is to take stock of what you're most concerned about with the change. So what is that? What has surprised you? What don't you like about it? What has are you plucked about with regard to this change that you don't like? And then also decide how you're going to show up for your people every day. So one of the things a friend of mine used to say is, he would, from getting out of his car to going into the building, he would take stock of how he was feeling and then figure out, okay, how do I need to show up for my people today? What do they need? And he would just basically give himself an attitude adjustment by the time he got to the door. We have a little bit of a different thing here because we're not really going into the office, but it is a technique that you can think about doing for yourself. And then start executing strategies that are about taking care of yourself. And I really mean that that might sound like fluff, but it really isn't fluff. One of the things that we say a lot is that how you think about things, what you feel, whatever's going on with you matters a lot to a lot of people, because it has this ripple effect that you may or may not be tuned into. So taking care of yourself is really important right now. And then also get a coach like Ed suggested, someone who can be a trusted advisor to you to kind of help you be a place where you could be a sounding, get a sounding board, kind of a release for yourself, and also maybe some advice, would be good. But the idea is to, the more that you can do that to take care of yourself, the more present you will be for your people while you're going through this difficult situation.
Yeah, and this is, I know we've talked about some of this before, but in our corporate life, I was leading some of these very large groups under really difficult circumstances. And in the first time that Roxanne and I were working together, I was definitely in the dumps. And I probably said lots of stupid things, but one of the significant stupid things that I said in terms of things were going bad, and I was trying to put what I thought was a brave face on it and say, don't worry, I won't get upset about anything. I'll only be upset if the Redskins don't make the playoffs. There's like 8 things wrong with that statement. But fortunately for me, Roxanne was there to kick me in the butt and just remind me about like that kind of attitude is now pervading through this incredibly large team that we had. And because I had this kind of crummy attitude, I was blowing off some negative energy because I wasn't taking care of myself and I was feeling incredibly stressed. So having her be able to remind me about how impactful that was in a bad way to the team is really useful. And again, as I say that, it sounds really obvious, but it was not obvious to me when I was in the middle of it. And so having Roxanne there to kind of redirect me made a significant difference. So get someone to help you out. It's really important. Or be that someone for somebody else at your company, because that can be a dramatic interaction in a positive way.
Yeah, and to be fair, again, we're talking about, it's kind of like the difference between, I don't know, singing a song at home versus singing in front of, performing in front of a bunch of people, like an auditorium full of people. When you're at home, you're probably calm, but when you're in an auditorium full of people, your emotion is just, your head is just filled with emotion. It's the same thing. If you don't like the change that's going on, you can't really see what's happening. It's harder, much harder to see. So of course you're going to say things that you wouldn't normally say. So just think about it as, okay, I'm going to need help. I'm going to need to take care of myself more in order to make sure that I am approaching this in the best way for everyone involved. All right, and so before we go to our case study, just a reminder about how these things work together, right? So if you're introducing a change, it's going to impact the company. And we talk about joy at work being how much of these dimensions are present in the culture, right? So depending on how much of this, of accountability, adaptability, participation, commitment, depending on how much that already exists, is how well the group is going to take on the change. And that has an impact on how the change goes, and it could change the change. So it's just one of those things for you to think about. If you have a change that you dislike, but you have people who, feel these things strongly, they trust the company, they trust you, they are more likely to adapt as you need them to. So again, just another lens to look through.
Yeah, and this is, as you can see today, we're talking a lot about, feelings and emotions. And I remember doing a change class for an accounting firm, actually through the business school exec ed. And we kind of got to this point, and I said, all right, now we're going to talk about feelings. And there's all this kind of nervous laughter from the accountants. But I'm like, it doesn't matter how well you execute all the sort of structured, tactical components of this if you haven't taken into account everyone else's emotions as they go through it, you're not going to get the change that you wanted. And then boom, I got like 7 stories, literally, because it just kept going and going, of changes that they had enacted. There were clearly smart things to go do, but done poorly, that had angered so many of the members of the firm. And as a result, they hadn't gone well. And so this is really important to be able to take this in and bring it all together. So anyway, just one more hit on that. Please keep that in mind, because that is going to be a powerful component for you when you're executing a change in your own companies. All right, so we're going to go back to Leadership Skyward. So let me start off with just a quick reminder for some, and for Rich and a few other people that are new. Leadership Skyward is an aviation leadership experience company that gathers CEOs and senior executives together and takes them through 2- and 3-day workshops where they learn about communication and decision-making as done by pilots in the cockpit. And what's unique about their approach is they actually take those CEOs flying so that they can execute what they've learned while they're up in the air and actually feel it and experience it together. So for this go around of what we're doing, we're going to have all of you be consultants again, as we did a couple of sessions ago. And you'll be helping the CEO and the leadership team of Leadership Skyward to work through a pretty significant change that is happening for them right now. So you're all going to be part of the high-powered consultancy, the change decision. And you are we're going to break you up into groups again and kind of walk you through this problem. So Roxanne's going to give you the background on what's going on. That's posted on the website, so some of you may have read it, but we're just kind of giving you an overview and do that right now.
Okay, this is the last chapter of Leadership Skyward, so I'm going to read it to you as like a story. So, beyond the expectations of anyone, a highly contagious virus, COVID-19, rages across the world, shutting down economic activity as people are first told, then ordered to stay away from each other in order to stop the spread of the virus. Governors across the country give orders that gatherings of people are reduced to smaller and smaller amounts. Cancellations for Leadership Skyward workshops are rampant, and new bookings are non-existent. Leadership Skyward is facing a cash flow crisis. At this point, the new CEO has been chosen, and has been in the new role for weeks. It was Sophia from Chesapeake Aviation.
Oh, how about that? The rumors are true.
Happily, the concerns that had existed about her did not materialize. She has been warm in person and clear-sighted as a leader. Things were looking very promising until the virus hit. On a Friday morning at the regular leadership meeting, Sophia comes in with a dour face. After a deep intake of breaths, she begins. Folks, we need to make some big moves if we are going to save Leadership Skyward. That's right, we are at the point where we need to talk about saving the company. You have all been around long enough to know that as an aircraft operator, we have significant fixed costs. As of today, we are bringing in almost nothing. Fortunately, we have a decent cash reserve, so we have 10 weeks of operating costs covered. That's how long we have to figure out a new revenue stream. I have one decision to share with you and another I'd like to get your input on. The first decision is this, and it will be hard. I have been in contact with Central Virginia Aviation Maintenance. They are fortunately down one aviation mechanic. Because of that, and because we have been a good customers of theirs for aircraft overhauls, they have agreed to help us out. We are going to outsource all of our maintenance to them. That means Cassandra and the other maintenance techs will move to work for Central Virginia Aviation Maintenance. They will keep their current salaries and the benefits are comparable. Unfortunately, they do not need a VP of maintenance, so we will need another plan for that role. Sophia pauses and then holds up her hand. Before you ask, I've already talked to Ed about this and he agrees. He doesn't like it, but he agrees. Ed will join us in 10 minutes, but he wanted me to tell you the news myself. I know I'm new here and stepping in to take over the founder's leadership role is a scary thing for a company, but I want you to know I'm committed to Leadership Skyward and I'm impressed with all that you have accomplished. We need to take drastic action to save the company. Okay, that's the cost side. Making that move buys us another 4 weeks of cash, but only if we implement it in a week. That's painfully fast, but we need to do it. The second issue is revenue. We don't have any, and we need to get some. Ed and I have a couple of ideas, but want to hear what you think about them. The first one is fairly straightforward. There is a crisis in this country, and transportation is one of the issues. We could refit the planes and become a medical transport service. We move non-critical patients from overcrowded hospitals to others in the country that are not full yet. It won't pay nearly as well as what we have been doing, but we have no contracts and not even any contracts to do the work, but it's clear that there is a shortage of transport capability. Depending on who we are asked to move, it may expose us to the virus though. The second idea is that we develop a virtual offering. We could use our flight simulator to tie in people from their homes and conduct the entire workshop online. Of course, we have no idea if people will want to do that, no idea if the top technology will hold, and no idea what we can charge. But it is what we do. It's our core business. So let's figure out what we're going to do and manage through this change.
All right, consultant. So there's what you got to deal with. You have one change that's coming. Maintenance is getting outsourced at Leadership Skyward. And then you need to also come up with a plan on how we're going to handle one of those two options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split you into 4 breakout rooms. So let me tell you what you're going to do, and then I'll tell you what the rooms are. Well, you're going to come together and you're going to think about how to manage through the entirety of the change. For the first 2 breakout rooms, you're going to take on what if Leadership Skyward became a medical transport company, that as well as this outsourcing of maintenance. So what are the considerations? What's the change story kind of look like? What are you going to do with the key influencers? All the things that we talked about. Breakout rooms 3 and 4, you're going to be responsible for taking on, Leadership Skyward is going to move to be a virtual online offering for their experiences, as well as has to deal with this maintenance outsourcing. All right, so let me tell you who's going to be the leader in each group. And through my scientific method, I'm simply picking the top person that showed up in the breakout room. All right, so Carrie, you're going to lead breakout room 1. So you have a responsibility for understanding what's happening with becoming a medical transport company. Glenn, you're going to lead breakout room 2. Again, you're going to take on the medical transport company. Nate, you are going to lead breakout room number 3 and are going to take on becoming a virtual company. Amber, your breakout room 4, and same thing, you're taking on this virtual offering that Leadership Skyward can do. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to kick you into your rooms. You're going to get 15 minutes. Roxanne and I will come and visit the rooms, kind of make sure everybody's good. But I want you to come up with the outline of what the change plan needs to be for the things that you have responsibility for. All right, so I'm going to send you off to those rooms, and then we'll come visit and make sure everybody's okay. So here we go.
No, I know.
Those two. Okay. So we're going to join from over here.
Okay.
So that was 2. We'll go to number 1.
I don't know if we have any connections to any hospitals or urgent care facilities or anything. So I think that might be another important thing to research before we get started.
Right. And another cost consideration is knowing nothing about medical transport. Does somebody in the medical field have to be present when you're transporting supplies? Or, sorry, I have a lot of landscaping going on outside.
Me too.
Okay. So would that mean that we actually have to pay to have another body on the plane? So that's another cost to consider.
You guys doing okay? Seems like you're off to the races. Just want to check in.
Good.
You're doing a great job, Carrie. Keep them, working the problem. Especially Megan can get out of control. So just watch that. All right.
He's not wrong about that.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, they don't know if the market is there, but I think you're going to market to the same people in the same way with a different product. So I think that the biggest gap is technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Okay.
cost to hire somebody. I mean, who is the technological expert that knows how to even put this together, and how much is that going to cost for a company that's has no revenue?
So when we talk about technology, I mean, that's really interesting because we're, going virtual. Obviously, there's a big change. And so part of defining what's realistic for us to eat
into these other areas, we had to go with maintenance first because there's less maintenance being done as the planes are being used less. I mean, it is still COVID related, but it just has metrics behind it. I don't know. I mean, Deborah, is that what you were saying before? I don't know if I have a better
Well,
answer.
I think also I think it's group 1, they're looking into it being a medical transport option, and if they don't do that and the planes aren't running, you really don't need maintenance. So some of this would have to do with almost what they come up with medical transport. I don't know. I think that I'm coming from an HR standpoint and just seeing how things have played out, where companies are having to furlough people, they are having to lay off people. And it's very likely that they've got to take a major chunk out of this business to make it viable. And it's almost like an outsourcing thing where rather than laying off or furloughing people, they found them a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm an HR person. I'm HR marketing kind of person. So I'm less likely to go at it from a metric standpoint, but more of a people standpoint. Mm-hmm. And, when you look at what's really going along, I mean, think of the people who've been furloughed or laid off, that they
we tell
Gets me every time out of those aviators.
Who is this guy? Awesome.
All right, consultants, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say because I'm paying a lot of money for this.
What are we charging you per hour?
A lot, apparently.
Yeah, well, we're about to go bankrupt, so you guys better have something good. All right, so I'd love to hear what we came up with. So Carrie, can we start with you and what your team was able to think through?
Absolutely. I mean, when we first started talking, we really just started asking a lot of questions about actually going in that direction, but then just assumed that we made the decision. So one of the most important things was our communication, and we wanted to communicate, to our workforce now, what are some of the strengths they already have that will easily translate into their new role in medical transport. Like you already know how to do this, and that's going to fit perfectly with your new role here. Just to soften the switch, because it's a drastic change in what their work's going to look like every day. And to make sure we communicate the why and the what behind the change, why we're doing it and what it's going to mean for each individual person. And also to talk about what the risk is for their health, how we're going to protect them, providing full PPE, sanitation protocols. And then during the 10 weeks that we're undergoing this change, to make sure that we have weekly updates to the team, even if there really isn't much to change or much to report. Changes like changes in COVID, because we know that information on that changes every week too. And then after the change, we want the expectation that we're going to have, at least monthly or updates after that, or meetings, town hall meetings, so that everybody also knows that they have an opportunity to bring any pain points forward at those times. So we can hopefully keep the rumor mills from growing really big. If people feel that they have an open forum to discuss things, hopefully they'll look forward to bring it to that instead of, the water cooler.
Yeah, how pilots like to gossip, right, Carrie? So it's good.
It's not just pilots, I promise you. We wanted to have a point person, a champion, and a sponsor for the change that employees could really connect with. And for that reason, we chose Frida. She's been with the company for a while, so she's already earned the trust of, everyone else there. We felt the new CEO probably hadn't been there long enough to build that. And then also creating feedback channels for employees too, to close the loop with the change. And that's all that we had, unless my team wants to add anything else that I might have forgotten to write down.
Well, that was good stuff. So I'm glad that I'm writing the check for your work for today. It was totally worth it.
Yeah, I love the idea of Frida being the sponsor. That's awesome. I hadn't thought of that.
So Glenn, with your group, what you got other things to add or anything you want to amplify off of what Carrie outlined for the first one?
Yes, as our group, Holden and Rich, had tremendous input. We wanted to evaluate and think about the skills and traits that are necessary in the department and the move, and then assess what each of the team members took to the joined process and activities, and how we would work together to get the most value out of the skills and traits that the individuals took into the activity. The second part in the discussion was that to recognize and discuss that there's two elements to the transition. One relates to the journey of making the transition. The other one is to look at the destination. And as Rich positively pointed out, most activities like this, the destination ends up being fun and a good thing. The journey is tough, always. And so have a recognition of that with the people, and then be positive about the possibilities that would come out of the new activity, the new program, and the new relationship.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, gets them into seeing the future as a good thing.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I think pointing out that it can be better. It's not so great right now, but it can be better is going to be really useful for rallying everyone together and having them pull together in a particular direction. It's awesome.
Yeah, especially as it relates to making a positive contribution to the world right now, right?
Right. So you can build off of that as part of the reason for being for the company. It's good. All right, Nate, what did you guys come up with when we started to think about moving the company virtual?
When we looked at that revenue stream possibility, we thought that it made a lot of sense because we are at our heart a leadership training company. And this unique experience that we provide is part of that leadership training. It's wonderful and it sets us apart in many ways, but we are very good at leadership training. And leadership training can be done virtually. And then if we can find ways to incorporate some of that flying experience, that's wonderful. But we think that our customers are going to forgive some of the fact that you just can't have quite the same experience. When we started talking about this, we talked a lot about defining the problem. I think that was the first thing we needed to do. Is Mike mentioned it, and some of the other members of my team said we really need to define what this problem is that we're trying to solve, and why. And really, kind of at the heart of that was why are we doing it this way anyway? And if we can figure that out, then we've figured out a lot of what we need to communicate to the team initially. And so we really wanted to think through why it makes sense for us as a business to do that. And we do have so many great assets in leadership training already. We have a curriculum, we have a way that we do it. And a lot of it is, the presentation format is the planes, but now it doesn't necessarily, it can't be, right? At least not that physical experience. And so if we can bring some of that experience using some of the planes, that's great. And we think we can do that. Maybe it's existing footage that we've already taken. Maybe it's we need to go up in the planes and take some more footage. Maybe we could even find a way to do a virtual like telepresence thing while there's a live plane flight kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
But however we execute it, a lot of our talent that needs to be engaged is going to be the leadership training folks. And a lot of them are the same people that were the pilots. So we want to think about what that means in terms of how much we're paying those folks, including our CEO. And we want to think about who's necessary right now to do that and who can pivot into roles to support that.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that we get to keep as many people as possible. The other thing that was great about this revenue stream potentially is that we've already got those relationships. We've got customers who have had a great experience with us in the past, and it's way easier to a lot of times to get buy off with existing customers than trying to go chase new customers. And so we're excited about that. Even though their budgets may be tied up, a lot of them might not be able to work with us. There's probably several that are able to, and they've already got those relationships, so we can continue that and give them a great leadership experience. And one of the team members also mentioned that, that's really at the end of the day, that's our strength. And that's what we're known for. And so we're giving it to them in a little different way during this time. But it also sends a message that we didn't have to pivot away from our main business in order to do in order to keep doing business, and neither do they.
Great. Good stuff.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is it'll make sense to the employee. Probably.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. I think giving that kind of context and building up will make sense to everyone, and feels like a useful way to bring them along. We're solving the problem together. It's not having to you get to be part of the solution and get to make something good happen out of all this. Yeah, it's great. Amber, what did you guys have? What would you add on top of what Nate said, or amplify, or?
Well, our discussion was a little bit different, it sounds like, than everybody else's. So,
Well, wait a minute. You're just putting your check in jeopardy, Amber. All right, but go ahead.
well, first we actually started off with discussing the fact that we're outsourcing maintenance.
Yeah.
There was a big concern during our interview process, especially with Sophia, that she was going to outsource maintenance. So it seemed extremely convenient that COVID is, causing this to happen. So we talked about how to handle that change management first. We felt we had very data-driven people, and we had HR-driven people in our conversation. So we felt that we should use the fact that our planes are grounded, that they don't need their 50 or 100-hour maintenance cycles as often, to not require the maintenance team. So use the data on that side, but also really push for the fact that they are essential, which is why we were able to find them other work. So use the positivity of the fact that we have a place for them to go, coupled with the fact that our planes are not flying as often, they don't require as much maintenance, therefore we can't hold on to this staff at the moment. That said, even though we see that the VP of maintenance has been decided to let her go, we feel that that's actually a poor decision. That there are other non-essential or more non-essential hires, meaning that if you're let go of your VP of maintenance, you have no one to oversee the maintenance teams that come in to work on our planes. And we are the owners of the insurance policy. We are the responsible people. So having no maintenance oversight seems like a really poor idea, especially if we choose to continue to fly. So is there any way we can repurpose our VP of maintenance either to oversee a lot of the external maintenance people or handle logistics? We kind of feel like logistics or operation might be a little bit less important than maintenance at this time. So we advocate not letting go of our VP of maintenance. Anyway, going on to the next piece. Virtual, some of the questions we had were, what is the software? What is the upstart cost? Who are the instructional designers? Do we have any core competencies like that? Or do we have any competencies like that on the team? How do you add the level of discomfort that being up in the air provides? And we feel like that's kind of our competitive advantage as a leadership team. Not necessarily that we are leadership trainers, but that way we can provide a unique experience. So again, sorry, Nathan, we actually did not feel like the virtual leadership training was really playing to our core competencies or responding to COVID appropriately. Other things we would like the company to consider are outsourcing as cargo, which reduces our team's exposure to COVID. So it still is using our planes, not from an EMS functionality, still uses our pilots, but we are now transporting goods instead of people. Because when you look at EMS, the concern is our pilots might not be night current, they might not have all of the qualifications that are required for EMS transport, according to the FAA. So those are concerns with either going that route and also the virtual route. So we looked at cargo, and then we also looked at personal charters or rescue services. So a lot of people from either in travel insurance or health insurance are stuck in places or need to move. They might not be COVID positive, but they're either stuck out of country or they're stuck away from their homes because of COVID. So offering those charter services. But between that and cargo, we think those are two necessary services within the COVID environment. And they also could continue to be revenue streams after COVID. So our thoughts.
Fabulous. So what we've seen.
Start our money?
I think you're gonna write the check.
All right, I'll write the check. Fine. All right. So I think what we have proven though is MBA students cannot get away from having to work on the strategy. So I don't care what your strategy is. I want to change it. That's just the way you guys are built. So
Interesting.
congratulations. All right, so we're down here getting to the end of our time. So a couple of things we wanted to say. One, we've mentioned to you guys several times that we've got this joy research going on. We're looking to put together our preliminary findings and hoping to do that in a webinar next month. So we'll invite you guys to that if you're interested and you want to see what's going on.
Hear what the CEOs have to say.
Yeah, we're inviting all of them. So no cost or anything. Just want, if you guys are interested and want to hear what's happening with that, I think that would be kind of fun, curious for you to see. And then we wanted to say thank you, especially all of you that were able to come to so many of these. It's been great to get a chance to do all of this, and thank you for living through it all with us as we're doing it virtually as well.
Do you have the slide up on the screen?
No, I can.
Yeah, why don't you put the slide up on the screen? So we'll put this presentation up on the site after the session. And you might want to download this one, especially because what we wanted to do is bring to your attention, if you can bring slide 20 up. We want to just bring your attention to slide 20. You know, any of this material could be helpful for you when you're leading a change you don't like, but on slide 20 it kind of gives you a summary of things to just think about. And what I would say is back to what Ed said earlier about, yeah, it totally makes sense when we're talking about it right now, but when you're in the heat of the moment of leading a change you dislike, I would challenge you to bring this particular page into your life and look at it from time to time. And just ask yourself, am I doing this? And that is going to be good enough for that particular moment.
Rowdy.
So again, I would encourage you to just download it and just have it ready. And we don't want you to remember every single thing that it says on this page. That's not our goal. Our goal is for you to remember, oh, I have this thing that can help me right now. Let me go find it. And then look at it when you're in that moment of leading a change that you just don't like. And then decide, okay, what of this is useful to me right now? What can I do right now to make a positive step in a good direction? So that's really the last thing I would share with you before we close out this particular topic.
All right.
So thanks for letting
Great.
me do that.
Sure. So Debbie, let me throw it back to you. You want to close us out?
Or thank you so much, Ed and Roxanne. This has been terrific. And the Awesome Change Leader series has just been exceptional. And the way that you were able to pivot to offer the series online really enabled us to maintain our traction with our extracurricular programs. That's been wonderful. And we had, this morning, we actually had a staff meeting with Mickey, the dean, communicating with us about what's happening with COVID and bringing students, staff back to the campus. You know, he's been great with just maintaining communication with us and listening to us. And so I've seen somebody in action doing just what you've been teaching us. Just the topic couldn't have been more timely. And we're working through change now and an uncertainty, and we're going to be doing so for the foreseeable future, just with what we have going on in the world. Yeah. But and what I especially loved too was that we were able to bring alumni from outside of Richmond to participate in our programming. That's something that, you know, when we're doing everything in person, we wouldn't have been able to do. So it's just been great. Amber, I can't remember if you're in Montana or Oregon or where you are, but it's just, you know, just having you guys participate is wonderful. And we're also thinking about new ways for our students and alumni to connect. And so we've just actually sent out a query to our students about, okay, so in the summer, we're still going to be on Zoom. You want to connect with alumni want to connect with you. What would you like to hear from our alumni about? And I'm asking them to submit topics. So I'm going to be back with alumni too to say, hey, our students are interested in hearing about this. Does anybody have this expertise that they might participate in a program? But it's been great. Thank you, Ed and Roxanne, and thank you all to our students and alumni for being a part of the series. It's been really wonderful. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. All right, all. Fly safe.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.